Jim Stewart. I'm Rick Collins, and this is Off the Bench. I don't know if we should get into the U.S. men's national team. I really want to talk about Christmas lights.
People, it's not even halfway through October.
And we're putting up Christmas lights, and we're not only just putting them up, we're actually turning them on.
And we can't tell if it's people being overzealous or if it's them hiring crews to come put the lights up and then they plug them in and forget
just don't have them on. Anyway, I know I don't want to get back to the U.S. men's national team. Last night was an epic failure. Later, we're going to have a call in from Tyler Kern, our soccer insider, to talk more about it.
You just got really quiet.
I'm depressed, man. I mean, what are we supposed to do after this? We are not going to Russia for the 2018 World Cup.
We can rely on the women. The women at least are good at soccer.
Yes, but this has been a staple of the World Cup
for over 30 years.
For over 30 years. The U.S. is going to be there with the men's and women's teams. Now we're going to watch and we're going to root for what? Iceland?
But here's the entire point that I've been making the last couple episodes when it comes to soccer. It's not like we've had a winning tradition. The only tradition you're talking about is actually having the name U.S. in these competitions, right? It's not like the U.S. goes very far into these competitions. No. We get lucky if we get into the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16. It almost felt like March Madness. I was talking about that, but the U.S., until we get to the point where we destroy CONCACAF and we start getting into these tournaments and getting far, I really don't. I mean, I care, but it's not going to blow me away devastating if all of a sudden we don't make it.
But even, look, I know we're not going to get into the Final Four of a World Cup, and especially after last night, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But this was a game that was winnable. This was a hex that was winnable. We should be in this World Cup. That's the problem, is we should be in this World Cup, and now we're not.
And my fear came to fruition. I cannot...
Fruition.
Yeah, whatever.
Fruition.
I can't stress enough how much I feared the fact that that the U.S. would go into Trinidad with a horrible sense of, we got over the hard stuff, this is easy. It's sort of like when you see in all the kid movies growing up where they're like, easy out, guys, easy out. They all crowd the infield and then they hit a ball into the outfield and they get an in the park home run.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We came in so cocky, and you could tell by the lack of energy.
After a 4-0 win to Panama, I'm not really that surprised, to be honest.
But this is, these are the games that people need to watch out for. They're called trap games for a reason.
Yes.
You go in thinking this is going to be easy.
Yeah, Trinidad hadn't even won a game in the last 9 matches. They had not won. They didn't have a win so far in this hex. They were 0-5 going into this game. Now, they're at home. The weather and the field were a nightmare. The weather beforehand, but the field was a nightmare during the game. And the U.S. came out and just played like crap. They just laid down to a Trinidad team that didn't even have their best players out there.
I think this is going to be a 2-segment one. I think we really need to talk about what changes need to be made. And I have voiced my opinion that this team is full of older players or development guys.
Yeah.
They need to get rid of the older players.
Yeah, and what I looked at was we really only have 5 or 6 guys who I'm willing to keep around for the next go-around. I think Bobby Wood, Christian Pulisic, Kellen Acosta, and Jesse Gonzalez need to be the guys that the team's built around. Yeah, and there's a few other guys, Yedlin, Villafana, and I'd like to keep Cameron around just for that, elder statesman of the team.
And Tim Howard. I would love to keep Tim Howard.
He won't be. He'll be 40 by the time the next World Cup comes around.
My question is until we find someone who is good enough to replace him,
Jesse Gonzalez will be there.
All right.
That's why he changed over from the Mexican national team to the U.S. men's national team, because they believe he is the future goaltender of this team. Now, Horvath could be that guy. He's also very young and a good goalkeeper. But you've got 2 guys that are in their early 20s. They'll be in their mid-20s, their prime as goalkeepers. Those have got to be the go-to guys. Howard's done. Brad Guzan is done. Ramondo's done. There's nobody in that late 20s wings to fill in a goalkeeper. That's just not going to happen.
So you think we need to push down that plunger and blow up the U.S. national
yes,
team?
you've got to get rid of anybody basically over 26 years old. Cameron's the only guy over 26 who I think is worth keeping. And then just thinking about some of the other players, how they look. Omar Gonzalez, he's looked like a shell of himself in the last 5 or 6 matches. He's not the same player. I don't understand why he was starting. And yes, Dempsey is great. He's been great for U.S. soccer for a long time. But another guy who's just got to go. He's going to be too old by the time the next World Cup comes.
He's in
We've
the
gotta
same
go with the youth.
situation as a Donovan.
Yes.
Donovan had to be basically kicked out. And I think the same thing needs to be with Dempsey and on some of these older players. Altidore is way too sporadic with his play. They need to get consistency down.
Yeah.
You know what? If we're consistently mediocre or consistently working our way up baby steps, it can't be great, bad, because we don't know what the problem is.
It starts with the middle of the field. You put Bobby Wood up top. You put Christian Pulisic behind him. You put Kellen Acosta behind him. You put Jeff Cameron behind him, and then you put Jesse Gonzalez.
And you get rid of Bradley.
Jesse Gonzalez in goal, and you fill out the rest of the roster around that mid part of the field.
And we've got a ton of talent in the MLS, and we need to start bringing that talent up.
Yeah.
These players, I think they need to change how the U.S. national team is selected.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be the old boys, the stapled players every year. I think it needs to be a straight-up competition.
They didn't feel like
every
they had a
single year.
choice because there was this huge gap between the older players and the younger players who were skilled. The mid-20s, the Altidore age, the 26 to 32-year-olds, there was a huge gap in there where we just did not have the talent we needed. But that killed us.
But
in this
what
go-around.
also killed us is there was no competition. They all knew they were going to make the team.
Yeah.
They all knew that there was no way someone else was going to break into that starting lineup or even take their spots on the bench. They need to go, okay, guys, after this certain age, you're gone, and from now on, you have to win your spot almost every game.
Yeah.
They got to show up and these coaches.
Hopefully that's going to happen with a new coach because it wasn't going to happen with Bruce Arena this go around, and I don't think it's going to happen with Bruce Arena if they keep him on.
He wasn't successful his first term.
No.
And he hasn't been successful
No.
the second term. He did get us past Panama, but then he laid a huge egg, and that is considered by many to be the worst downfall in U.S. history.
Worst loss in U.S. history right here. There's no doubt about it.
No,
Trinidad
it's
Tobago
sports
playing
history,
them
not
yeah,
just
that's true.
Not just men's
could well
soccer
be.
history. It's U.S. sports history.
Yeah, and we'll get more from Tyler Kern. Next, we're going to be talking about the Dallas Mavericks preseason. What could have been coming from the draft?
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
We are back, and we were discussing over the period of the last couple of days a what-if scenario because, now that you have Lauri Markkanen, it's the beginning of the preseason. You start seeing these rookies coming in and, starting to shape who they are.
You're talking about the Bulls having Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah, Markkanen, and then the U.S., the men, the U.S. men. See, it's still on my mind. It's so disappointing. But with the Mavs having Dennis Smith Jr., then there are Lonzo Ball in L.A. Where could it have been? Because we don't care about these other teams. It's just the Mavs right now.
And of course,
where could the Mavs have been? I mean, because, realistically, they could have moved around 2 or 3 or 4 spots if they really wanted to. So let's just poke one person when it comes to a what if. What if Lauri Markkanen had come to Dallas? I understand people were talking about him. They thought he was a Dirk Light. Did you see that a little bit in his second preseason game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he's coming in and playing these preseason games not necessarily against the top competition.
It is mixed.
It is mixed competition right now because we're still preseason, and the Cavs have elder statesmen that don't need to be playing 20 to 30 minutes during the preseason. They're trying to gel. Markkanen's coming off the bench. It's still early. I think he'll end up in the starting lineup at some point. His defense clearly is lacking.
Dirk?
But yes, I know. But his offense, he's a three-point shooter in the NBA. And I think there were
A top 3-point shooter in the
questions
NBA.
about whether, and it's always a question every single time that a guy's a three-point shooter. You see Doug McDermott, some of the other, 3 points, Kyle Korver, guys that were specialists in college. Can they transition to the NBA as a three-point shooter?
Jimmer Fredette?
Yes, exactly. The longer three-point line in the NBA, it doesn't always transition. And
I-
Markkanen clearly
And I
can
agree,
shoot the three. In
I
the NBA.
agreed, but then I saw a couple moves that made me think he has a little bit more potential outside of three. He had that nice fadeaway, that Dirk
Yes,
feeling
very
fadeaway in the
yes,
corner.
Dirk is fadeaway.
Woo, that was, even the announcers were like, whoa. He has athletic ability. He's faster than you think because he's a long strider. He has good hops, which is something that it looked very Dirkish.
Early Dirk.
Early Dirk. So my question is how do you think that compares to what Dennis Smith has done so far?
Well, I like what Markkanen can do. Obviously, he plays a position that the Mavericks would not be able to give him a starting role.
He could develop a little bit more.
He could develop under Dirk, but he'll get a lot of minutes in New York.
No,
Sorry, in Chicago. I'm thinking of Nick Kalina. But Lauri Markkanen is going to get a lot of minutes in Chicago because they're one of the worst teams in the NBA right now, or they're expected to be one of the worst teams in the NBA. Dennis Smith Jr. has an all-around game that the Mavericks are going to need this year. They need a point guard. He can do a
So it's a
lot of
need.
different things.
It's a need.
It is a need. And especially with Seth Curry now out, Dennis Smith Jr. is going to get a ton of minutes because what they're going to do is they're going to fill Seth's role with JJ and Devin. So he's going to have to play a lot of minutes. That role of coming off as a sixth man, no longer does Dennis Smith Jr. have that backup who can come in and play a lot of minutes for him because without Seth Curry, they're going to be weak at that backup six role. Wes Matthews, I think, is trade bait. I think they're going to get.
Can we trade for Markkanen?
I think we might know, but I think we might get a draft pick or two, maybe 2 second-round picks for Wes Matthews. Something we can work with. Dennis Smith Jr. so far has played really well. Each game he's gotten better. His defense is getting better. He's a defensive player too, and having a point guard that can play defense, especially when you have Barea out there or Devin Harris who are not defensive players, is really helpful.
The way I look at this is I see, as a lot of people have compared a Westbrook or a Derrick Rose
Yes.
type of player in Dennis Smith Jr. The issue is Markkanen, like Dirk, his game is not predicated on athletic ability.
Yeah.
It's on high release,
Yes.
good accurate passing, setting
Being
up pick and
tall.
pop,
It helps to
being
be
tall. Dennis Smith, my only fear with him is I think he was a great pick. My only fear with him is he does have he has had a knee injury, epic knee injury, and he tore his ACL, and that's a very, very recoverable injury nowadays.
Well,
but
it was a long time ago, and he's clearly still got the hop.
but how the big question becomes how quickly does that ability dissipate with him? Because every person's different.
Well, I think right now
Because he's only 6'2".
He's fine. Yeah, and he's going to be fine for the next 5 years. I think the question comes
agree.
when he gets to his mid-20s, does he start breaking down? Remember how Amari Stoudemire broke down his mid-20s after multiple knee injuries? That's where I would start having a concern. But you've got a contract only 4 or 5 years on Dennis Smith Jr. You're going to find out before then whether there's an issue.
That's why
I think
said,
we're going to get the best years out of him.
That's why
right now.
I agree. It was a toss-up for me. There was no wrong way to go. But
Yeah.
I think that Lauri Markkanen maybe won't blow up in the league like a Dennis Smith Jr. will with these epic dunks and these high, 48-inch vertical and all this different stuff. I think Lauri's going to have a more productive career. I think he's going to average more. He's going to be able to play longer.
It's possible, but all the Mavericks have to say is we didn't have a choice because Lauri Markkanen wasn't available when we picked. So.
Like I said, the whole point of this was
excuses
they
there.
could move.
Yes,
it wasn't out of the
they
realm
could have,
to move
but
around.
they would have had to give up assets, and they don't have enough assets to make it worthwhile for them to move up to get a player that maybe they had graded about the same.
What about this? And this will be the end of this segment before we move on. Do you see in the next draft class, because we've talked about it before, we think that the Mavericks will struggle again this year and probably be in the lottery again this year.
Yes.
Is there another player that is going to be like a Lauri Markkanen, who could come in and learn behind Dirk, because that is the next spot that we need to fill, is that tall, either power forward center position, because we have no idea about Noel
a
either.
spread four. I think they do need a spread four. If they're going to keep Noel around, they have to have a spread four, because that's the only way that Noel's going to be
Noel's not a
effective.
spread five.
No, we want Noel around the basket. You want him in that 10-foot and inside space. You want to open the court up for him so that he can
Lobs.
come off and catch lobs. So you got to have a spread four. Who's the guy to come in after Dirk? Clearly, Dwight Powell's the guy. They're trying to build into that.
But that's been like a 3 or 4 year
But-
project, and he hasn't
But
really
Powell, I
improved.
think, is always going to be a bench guy to come off. I mean,
He's an energy
if he
guy.
gets better and he's able to come off and give Dirk rest and play the same style Dirk does, but obviously
Well-
not at the level Dirk does, then I think Dwight Powell's fine doing that. But to find the starter to replace Dirk, there's not a guy right now. All the guys we're looking at are the super athletic freak athletes in this next draft, or the really tall, centers that play back to the basket. There's not
So
a
Markkanen
there's not
was
a
sort of
spread,
a
there's not a spread
enigma.
four coming out.
So it was an enigma in the last couple of years because there hasn't really been a spread four
Well,
with his skill
So
set.
Michael
for-
Porter Jr. could be that guy. He's not quite tall enough to be a spread four. He's more likely a small forward, but he's got size to him. So it's possible if he grew another inch or two, and guys are still growing at that age, that he could be that guy. But he's going top four, and there's almost zero chance that the Mavericks are going to get a top four pick. They're too good to get a top. They would have to have 2 or 3 major injuries. Harrison Barnes would have to go down. Dennis Smith Jr. would have to go down, and probably Dirk would have to go down for them to end up with a top four pick. I don't see that happening. We're going to be in that 10 to 12 to 13 range,
and this is
and there's not a guy right now. There is always that Euro that comes out a month before the draft, and people are like hyping the guy up big time, right? A month right before the draft. That's what I would look for the Mavericks.
On that note, just finishing this up, I do believe, and it's been something that has annoyed me about Mark Cuban, is that just look at the talent he's let go. Bursino, the last 2 games, has averaged over 15 points. He's that sharpshooter they needed. He's not as tall. He's 6'9",
Yeah.
but he had the ability to shoot like Markkanen. But again, he wasn't given the ability to be a confident shooter. But that is a conversation for another time. Coming up next is
Well, in Major League Baseball, we
yeah.
got to talk about what just came up in the news yesterday with Dusty Baker, and Dusty Baker's job is on the line. Dusty Baker came out and made excuses for why Steven Strasburg was not going to be the starting pitcher in this game today. Yesterday, the game was postponed. It was supposed to be Tanner Roark pitching, and Tanner Roark's going to go to the mound today. But Steven Strasburg is your superstar. And if you're the Washington Nationals, you're Dusty Baker, you hope that he demands the ball.
But what
in
is
this
he?
game.
I don't understand why he's making excuses. His back and the organization's back in this playoff is against the wall. They need to get some wins.
Yeah, well, they have to win this game, otherwise they're out.
And we
the
already
Cubs
seen
are up.
what's happened with Boston.
Yeah.
Boston's manager is out now.
Yeah.
So if they don't want the same situation happening in Washington, they need to get their act together. And I don't care this is my issue with athletes today. They are looking for every excuse not to play, right? When you had the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even the 90s, if you were a pitcher, a starting pitcher, and you pitched the night before that, and they come up and said, dude, you need to pitch again, what do you think the answer was?
Oh, yeah.
How many innings
I'm
do you
in.
need?
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's like, It's not my time in the rotation, man. I don't want to throw my arm out. I'm looking long-term in my career. Yeah.
I'm not feeling so
Yeah.
good today. So apparently Steven Strasburg is sick. The way that Dusty Baker said it was under the weather, and Dusty Baker made the
Was
excuse.
that a pun on the weather-related game delay?
Yes, exactly. That the air conditioning and the mold had led to him getting sick.
Oh.
Apparently, the mold in
They have
Chicago
a
is
mold
a real
issue?
problem.
They have a mold issue?
Get the mayor out, because
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Make an excuse. If you've got the sniffles, you're feeling a little bit under the weather, who cares? Go out and pitch. You're the superstar. You're earning over $170 million in this contract. Go pitch. Demand the ball. I mean, how can the rest of his teammates respect him if he's going to claim that he's sick not to pitch in this game?
And the starting pitcher should, not the starting pitcher, but the best pitcher on the team, when the game is on the line, when the series is on the line, needs to go, give me the ball in my hands.
Yeah.
In some ways, they need to have a bit of this wide receiver diva from the NFL going, I need the ball. Give me the ball. I will get us a victory. And that sort of sentiment is gone outside of hitters and fielders. Those guys are a little bit more demanding, but these pitchers, other than getting upset if they get pulled, they need to have that same kind of
It's
passion.
pretty rare, and you see it. There are certainly superstars still today that will demand the ball. Justin Verlander does it. Keuchel does it.
No, perfect example. That pitcher for the Yankees, I forgot his name, that got pulled within the first inning.
Severino.
Well, I would have been like, I'm not giving you this ball. You need to let me pitch this out. I need to get out of this rut on my own.
Yeah.
But did you see him? He just,
Yep.
here's the ball, and he walked off. Wait, this is what's happening when you have these kids growing up with, everybody's a winner. There's no losers. And so what these guys is that drive to be the best, that drive to be the number one, to be the top guy and have the entire team's fate resting on your shoulders, that sort of sentiment is getting erased from
Yeah.
these players.
We're all equal.
And they're not.
I'll get pulled out. That's fine. The next guy
Verlander is
coming will be
not the
fine.
same as the next starting pitcher.
No.
That's why you have a superstar. And
Exactly.
whether a superstar is named by the team or named by the people or based on stats, he's better than the rest of the pitchers.
Yeah, so Tanner Rourke's going to be taking the ball today at the mound, unfortunately, for the Nationals, because I think they're done. They're going to lose this game to the Cubs. It's going to be Cubs and Dodgers again. I'm sure the Dodgers do not want to see the Cubs again, but it's going to happen. And the Nationals now will have lost 4 out of the last 6 years in the NLDS. That's just unacceptable. That's why I think Dusty Baker's done. You can get to a playoffs, but you can't win a playoff series? Not with the talent they have. Bryce Harper, Steven Strasburg. There's no excuses anymore for having that much talent and not being able to win a playoff series. And this Cubs team is not that great. They are not the Cubs team from last year.
I guess I view it this way, regardless of what's going on, whether it's what's happening on the field or off the field, this has been a very exciting postseason in baseball. I think headlines are headlines, whether it's big victory or pitcher refuses to pitch.
Yeah.
He is under the weather. I think if anything that stirs up enough controversy that makes us either tune in or read or watch, that's interesting. And you know what? Baseball right now needs as much interest in it as possible.
Yeah.
And there is nothing, and very few people say there is nothing better than a good postseason in baseball.
Yeah.
Sports as a whole is healthier and better if baseball has a healthy offseason.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, sorry.
Postseason.
Postseason.
The Yankees also play today. The game with the Nationals and the Cubs is going to be a day game. It's at 3 o'clock. That's the makeup postponed
They
game
got
time.
to choose better times.
Yeah, it's really horrible. In fact, it's not 3 o'clock. It's 3:08. Now the Yankees and Indians play tonight 7:08. The Yankees need to win this game, I think, to save Joe Girardi's job.
But the question is, does Joe still want to be there? So all Joe's doing now is trying to win a World Series.
Yeah.
If he wins a World Series, he can walk off like John Wayne and go to a place that actually appreciates him.
Well, and we just heard that the Boston job opened up this morning. So hey, you know,
Talk
you
about
don't even
making
have
an
to move.
impact. Talk
Don't
about,
even have to move.
Talk about making an impact.
Yeah.
Going from the Yankees to the they would hate him. But
Yeah.
but that's going from a a grindhouse to a grindhouse.
Yeah.
Because Boston is just as fanatical, and they're just as cynical, and they're just as.
And will they like a Yankee coming in and managing their team?
If he
I
gets
don't
some
know.
wins.
Now, I think the best option would be if Dusty Baker loses his job with the Nationals, you go in there, and if you win a series there, people will praise you forever.
Coming up next, we will have Tyler Kern.
Yeah, and then we'll also have Matt Wixon in studio tomorrow, talking a little bit more
Exciting
Frisco
week, guys.
high school sports. Good stuff to come. I'm Rick Collins from Off the Bench, and we've got Tyler Kern on the phone, our soccer insider, and we're talking about what is probably the worst game in U.S. men's national team soccer history. Tyler, where do we go from here?
Wow. Well, we don't go to Russia next summer. That's the first thing. Is no World Cup for the U.S. men's national team for the first time in my lifetime. 1986 was the last time there was a World Cup held without the United States in it. As a result, the United States needs to take a long and hard look in the mirror and just ask some tough questions about how they got here and where they're going now and who the leadership should be as we move forward, because this has all happened under the reign of Sunil Gulati. He's been the U.S. Soccer Federation president for over a decade now. He continues to run unchallenged as he runs for re-election. And so this is a guy that has overseen some pretty large failures. He's done some good things for U.S. soccer in terms of the marketing, the branding, and that sort of thing. But under Sunil's watch, the United States missed out on the U20 World Cup in 2011, the Olympics in 2012, the U17 World Cup in 2013, the Olympics again in 2016, and now the 2018 World Cup. And so things are starting to stack up, and the voices have begun to clamor for a new person at the top, some new leadership, and some new vision throughout the entirety of the program.
Yeah, one of the things that I've really been focused on here, especially since we're right down the street from FC Dallas, is the youth level. And FC Dallas has done an amazing job with the youth level up here in North Dallas. Is that something that needs to permeate across USA Soccer? And is that where our structure is failing in terms of producing young talent? And the reason why we haven't made the Olympics and we haven't been sending teams to U17 and U20 and U23 World Cups.
Yeah, so that's absolutely where the problem lies. And, it probably goes back to younger ages even than U17. It probably goes back to, around the U12 area, just recognizing good talent and getting them into programs that aren't pay-for-play. Pay-for-play is kind of a curse word in soccer circles these days, as it's just it's a barrier to entry, right? You want anybody who's good enough to be able to be in the position to play, to have their talents and their abilities fostered under the right leadership. And right now, that can't happen at youth levels because of the way it's all set up. I don't know that there's no getting that back into Pandora's box. And so what we need to be able to do is to restructure at the youth level in such a way that it allows us to get in kids into systems like FC Dallas, into local systems. And this is where maybe the size of the United States actually hurts us a little bit, whereas, people have been comparing the United States, over 300 million people live here, compared to Iceland, where there's only 323,000 people, live in Iceland. Yet they're qualified for the World Cup and we're not. It's easier, though, to identify who's talented, who's not, who can play, and give them the one-on-one instruction that they need at an early age. And it becomes pretty apparent that that's what's lacking in the U.S. system. And so what can we do better? We need to use the money that U.S. Soccer has at its disposal to hire more scouts, honestly, to get out, to see more players, to get them into situations that they can be seen by bigger clubs like the MLS clubs that are investing heavily in their academies these days. Those players, first of all, have to be discovered. They have to be shown off at showcases. There are lots of different things that need to happen in order for these players to be seen. I don't want to say there are other Christian Pulisics out there, but there are other players that, there are Kellen Acostas out there who are very good MLS players who will one day go overseas and do great things in Europe, who can be national team players in the right environment with the right coaching. Those guys are out there, but we're not doing a good enough job of finding them. And also, if we're failing to put other good players around guys like Kellen Acosta, then those guys aren't getting Olympics. They're not getting those kind of major tournament experiences, which then hurts them when it comes down the stretch of World Cup qualifying, and that's a big part of it as well. And so the youth development aspect is really a big problem and really something that needs to be addressed. And U.S. Soccer should seriously look at bringing in smart people who know the system better than anybody else to help reorganize that. It's what Germany did in 2000
Yeah.
when they crashed out of the World Cup. They put together a massive reorganization where they hired over 150 scouts, and that's what's paying off for them now. They're the defending World Cup champions. They're still the best, in my mind, still the best national team in the world, and it's what's gotten them to where they are. 18 years down the road, after hiring all these scouts, they have just an ungodly amount of talent at their disposal, to where they started a B team over the summer and won the Confederations Cup. That's insane. And so the United States should probably look into following that model as much as possible. But it's not going to be easy. But it starts there. It starts with the kids.
Yeah, and you've seen what the Bundesliga has been able to do in the last 10, 15 years. Part of that is developing young talent and bringing it up, and that young talent creating better competition in their professional league, which has then recruited more players from overseas to come in and play in Germany's Bundesliga. And they're now probably a top 4 or 5 league in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ideals that a lot of the Bundesliga teams use, which has kind of helped them more so than other countries. You don't see this in England. You don't see this in Spain or anything like that. Is if you are a youth player in a Bundesliga side and you are in their academy, by the time you are 19 or 20, you should be knocking on the door of playing on the first team. You need to be pushing the players that are already up playing for the full senior team by the age of 19 or 20, or they look at you as a fringe prospect that might not pan out. It's that young. You're supposed to be pushing for that, and we don't expect that of players in America. If we consider players still young when they're 23, 24, and you know what? It's just not that way in Germany right now, and that's been to the benefit of Christian Pulisic. He got over there and he showed, hey, I can play with these guys at the age of 17, 18. And so he got into the first team because that's what's expected. And that's benefited Germany greatly. Even just having guys like Christian Pulisic on their teams, pushing their under-19 players to be better, to compete with him for spots. And yeah, so they have no problem bringing in players from overseas because they know, A, that's going to push our players, and B, it's just going to make us a better league overall, which in the end is going to be good for our national team. And so that model has worked out very well for them. And I would like to see MLS teams adopt something similar, not purely for the benefit of benefiting the U.S. men's national team, but also it makes you better as a league. I think that's the way forward for MLS is, hey, you've got these kids, you've got these 18, 19-year-olds who are young, fresh, energetic. We need to be able to coach them up so that by the time they are 19, 20, they're knocking on the door of the first team.
Yes. Also, Tyler, we talked about earlier, who are the guys you keep around? Because I think we're all on board with this is really wholesale. We really need to clean up this men's national team player pool. We need to decide who are the guys, maybe 5 or 6 guys we keep around and clean up the rest. Who would those 5 or 6 guys be for you?
For me, you obviously start off with Christian Pulisic. He's a generational talent. We've never had anybody like him, and this is probably the most depressing thing about missing out on the World Cup is that he just doesn't get to perform and show up on that international stage next summer the way that we all hoped for. But he's first for me, and then second would probably be DeAndre Yedlin. He's 24 years old, playing a position that there just are never enough outside backs. You never have enough right backs or left backs, and it can be very hard to replace them. He also has an elite skill with his speed that is just it is legitimately world class. And so when you can find a guy like that who's playing in the Premier League, you want to keep him around and you want to build around him for sure. Other players I would definitely keep around. I think Bobby Wood has some tricks up his sleeve and can be a solid player. He's another guy that's only 24 years old and plays in the Bundesliga for Hamburg, and he's another guy that I think can continue to grow and build. And so I would certainly keep him around. Paul Arriola did not have a great game last night. He had a pretty good game against Panama on Friday night, but he's another guy that I would like to continue to utilize. As you need the glue guys, you need guys that can be role players and know what their role is. And he's one of those guys that will work his butt off every game, run up and down the touchline tirelessly, and gets back on defense if you ask him to. So he's another guy we keep around. And then I'm struggling to round out
So
five.
I'll give you some heads up on it. I had Acosta, I had Jesse Gonzalez, I had Villafana, and I had Cameron as the other guys I might think about keeping around.
Yeah, so center backs can stick around a little bit longer because they're a position that's not built on speed. So I can see potentially keeping Jeff Cameron for his leadership abilities. But actually, the U.S. is so deep at center back at the youth levels, just with some young guys that are coming through. I would keep Kellen Acosta. I think he's a very valuable player at the international level, playing that number 8 role. And if we want to talk about youth kids, there are friendlies that are coming up for the U.S. in November that they anticipated would be friendlies that would help them build towards the World Cup. Obviously, that's not going to happen now, but I would like to see a roster of all guys under 25 years old in that in that team, utilizing center backs like Matt Miazga, who plays for Vitesse over in the Netherlands, or Cameron Carter-Vickers, who's owned by Tottenham, playing for Sheffield United right now in the Championship division in England. And then I would like to see, I would like to see Weston McKennie, those kind of guys, guys that are around the age of 19 to 22, 23 years old. Bring all those guys in. Like, now, you're not going to be in the World Cup. You need to start looking 4 years down the road at the next qualifying cycle and identifying the guys that are going to be your guys. Let's do that now. Let's jump on that train, because there are talented U.S. players out there that are younger. Let's get them in. Let's get them playing together, and let's start identifying who exactly we're going to build around for the future, and how exactly we want to play. That's also been a problem for the U.S. It's just that we are such a conglomerate of different nationalities, different styles, different people, that we have a hard time determining, okay, here's our national identity when it comes to the national team. Here's how we play as a country. And the sooner you can get a group of guys together that can get on the same page, I think the better.
Yeah. Tyler Kern, thanks so much for your opining on this year's World Cup and non-qualifying for the World Cup. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult next year watching the World Cup without the U.S. in it. I was 5 years old when we last were not in the World Cup, so.
But there's always the women.
I don't know. 2018 Russia World Cup without the U.S. It is what it is right now. Tyler, thanks so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll have better news with FC Dallas around the corner next time we talk.